Pretty decent day, and temperatures once again climbing into the mid to high teens in places, but still quite chilly up towards the far northeast of Scotland, where temperatures will struggle here. Pretty good conditions still on Wednesday, but we will start to see some rain moving in from the southwest and turning windier from the southwest too later this week.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It is 7 o'clock. Welcome back to GB News. I'm Aaron Armstrong. Let's get you up to date with the headlines. The government is planning an extra evacuation flight from Sudan tomorrow for British nationals trying to leave the country. It will depart from the eastern city of Port Sudan, where earlier the first shipment of humanitarian aid arrived. Now, those hoping to leave are being told to get to the international airport there before midday. British Navy ships have also docked in Port Sudan to offer support for the evacuation effort. One of the rival factions says it will extend the truce for a further 72 hours, starting from midnight, although gunfire has been heard in Khartoum today, undermining the current ceasefire. The Nurses' Union has relaxed its strike rules to ensure critical services will still operate during a 28-hour walkout, which starts at 8 o'clock. NHS England says discussions with the Royal College of Nursing have resulted in an agreement for minimum staffing levels to be provided as cover for life and limb services. They have serious concerns about patient safety. The public are being urged to use the NHS wisely. The Health Secretary, though, says he's hopeful the dispute can be resolved later this week.
The Staff Council is due to meet on Tuesday. I'm cautiously optimistic that the Staff Council will agree to then vote in favour of the deal. But I think it's right to wait until Tuesday for the Staff Council to meet. And this strike is premature. I think it's disrespectful to the other trade unions. I think the RCN should have waited. They're a member of the Staff Council. They were part of the negotiations. And as I say, Pat Cullen herself recommended this deal to her members.
Liz Truss is contesting a government bill relating to her use of a grace and favour country house while she was Foreign Secretary. The Mail on Sunday claims the former Prime Minister has been asked to pay around £12,000 back for costs incurred at the Chevening estate in Kent. The invoice covers the period last summer when she was fighting the Conservative leadership election against Rishi Sunak before her short-lived premiership. Now, the bill is largely for hospitality, but also includes missing items, such as bathrobes. Ms Truss says it mostly relates to official government business, rather than personal expenses. A manhunt is ongoing in Texas for a gunman who's suspected of killing 5 of his neighbours, including an 8-year-old boy, on Friday. Police in the United States say the victims were shot dead when the family asked Francisco Oropesa to stop firing a semi-automatic weapon in his garden. The suspect, who's Mexican, is believed to have fled the United States. The British Army's begun rehearsals for the coronation of King Charles. Soldiers from all divisions of the armed forces have been gathering at training areas across South London to prepare for what's likely to be the biggest ceremonial event of their careers. Soldiers have flown home from operational duties or training exercises from as far afield as Cyprus, Iraq and Estonia to represent their regiments at the event. And the Stone of Destiny has been welcomed to England in a special ceremony ahead of the coronation. It dates back to the 12th century and is normally on display at Edinburgh Castle. It will sit under the King's throne next week, and it has been used in coronations for almost 1,000 years. TV online, DAB and TuneIn Radio, this is GB News. But now it is time for Free Speech Nation.
The Guardian is accused of anti-Semitism, another woman is deplatformed at the University of Bristol, and the Canadian government cracks down on free speech again. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. This is the show where we take a look at current affairs, politics and that interminable culture war whose existence is denied by its chief antagonists. Coming up on the show tonight, is Brexit being betrayed? We're going to speak to a former Conservative and UKIP MP who led the cause to leave the European Union. Has therapy gone woke? We'll speak to a leading psychologist and psychotherapist about whether treatment is taking an activist turn. Plus, we have an exclusive interview with Scott Nugent, a woman who transitioned to a trans man at the age of 42. Scott has had to recover from several near-death experiences during the process and reveals all later in the show. And I've got wonderful studio guests tonight. I've got the comedians Josh Howie and Cressida Wetton. Welcome both. Are you well, Josh?
I'm good. It was my daughter's 7th birthday party today.
Oh, that's nice. So you're here instead?
Yes, exactly. It's happy. I was like, see you later, guys. See you, suckers.
That's a good excuse.
It was earlier, and I broke my... I've been dieting, and I had some of the chocolate
You had the cake?
I had the cake, and then I went totally crazy.
Yeah, but you do the crash diets, don't you?
That's it. And then I just ate everything, and all the parents are scared of me now.
I think that's fair enough. He lives a life of extremes, does Josh?
Right,
yeah.
OK.
You are less of an extremist.
Yeah, I went for a bit of a walk earlier, a bit more relaxed. I haven't been to any children's birthday parties today.
That's about it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the way to live. Anyway, we're going to start tonight because we've got a lovely studio audience here, and they've normally got some questions. We've got a question from Rick. Where is Rick? Hi, Rick.
Hello. Does the left have an anti-Semitism problem?
OK, and there's been 2 stories that relate to this week. Of course, The Guardian has now apologised after a cartoon depicting the BBC's outgoing chairman, Richard Sharp, was criticised as anti-Semitic. We see the view of the cartoon there. And, of course, earlier in the week, Labour MP Diane Abbott was suspended after suggesting that Jewish, Irish and traveller people were not subjected to racism, and that was in a letter to the Observer newspaper. There's a lot to unpack here, Joshua. Let's start with the cartoon. What do you make of this?
I mean, the original question, does the left have anti-Semitism within it? It's like... OK, let's just...
We've only got 2 hours.
OK,
so I think you're going
Let's just sum up the last 7 years of my life. But yes, this cartoon, I mean, let me have my look at... I've got some notes here about it. It's massively anti-Semitic.
So when I saw it, I mean, it's so clear. You know, you can't escape the anti-Semitic tropes when you look at it.
Unless you're a Guardian editor or a cartoonist.
So this is the question. So Stephen Pollard from the Jewish Chronicle posed this question online, and I thought it was quite interesting. He says the issue for him wasn't even so much the cartoon; it was why that went through. Because I mean, the cartoonist, we should say, Martin Rosen, has apologised and said that none of this was intentional. None of the imagery was intentional.
None of the multiple examples of anti-Semitic imagery were intentional.
Right, but even if that's the case, why would someone not see that?
Absolutely.
And what does that suggest?
And by the way, his apology has been slightly undermined by it's not 100% confirmed, but a WhatsApp message that's just come out with him saying that people are just kind of offensiveness in the eye and beholder, and he's trying to sort of rub up. He's also liking a lot of tweets where people are saying that people are being dishonest when they're claiming it's anti-Semitic. So I'm just saying, I don't necessarily go in on his apology.
What are the tropes?
The tropes are, you've got Rishi Sunak as a puppet in the box. You've got the squid, which is like an age-old anti-Semitic image, like the tentacles of the squid. You've got this gold. Now, he's saying, oh, these yellow things aren't... They're actually...
He says they're not gold coins,
yeah,
they're
but actually, if you look at
it,
it doesn't make sense. Like, it's obviously...
So all of this, we can go back and we can't read his mind.
And you've got a person who's Jewish and his features being overly exaggerated as this dark, swarthy, big nose, big lip Jew. And the image is like could be taken out straight out of 1930s.
So this is why, you know, if people are arguing about what was going on in the cartoonist's mind, actually it is more important that people saw that and thought, that's fine, we can publish that, you know, because surely... They must have seen what you're seeing.
People make mistakes, people have unconscious racism, whatever. But and I saw someone make this point online, if he'd drawn Boris Johnson as a gorilla or something,
yes,
like people wouldn't be. But if he'd drawn someone who was black as a gorilla, everyone would be like, "That's it, you're out.
Yes,
that's racist." So why are they not seeing exactly the same imagery that's existed for hundreds of years?
What do you make of this one, Cressida? I mean, it does seem like
it's anti-Semitic bingo, isn't it? Check, check, check. Spectacular. And given that the Guardian are so sensitive in general about other things, it is astonishing that it got through so many people.
But that's a key point, though, isn't it? They are hypersensitive, often seeing racism and homophobia where they're not there, but when they have something which is so clearly peddling anti-Semitic tropes, they don't do anything. I mean,
it's just stunning. I can't believe they must have foreseen. I can't believe they didn't foresee this backlash.
So I'm confused about that. Why is there this? Is that just?
Well, this is it. It's the hypocrisy of the left. And I'm from the left, and this is what has amazed me over these last years: is they cannot be self-critical.
Yes.
And they cannot accept their own failings. And that's... How do you grow from that if you're perfect, if you're automatically on the right side of history in every way?
And we should say that The Guardian got in trouble before for a cartoon...
Last week... Oh, and now the cartoon...
Well, there was the cartoon of Priti Patel as a bull, and, of course, she's Hindu, and that has all sorts of connotations. And, again, you could say, well, the cartoonist might not have known she was Hindu or whatever. Why didn't someone see that?
Absolutely. Well, if they're so sensitive about all these other things...
Exactly.
If they're anti-racist, why are they not anti-racist in these instances? And we had Diane Abbott last week. And again, they went through the thing. You know, supposedly it was her first draft, even though it found out that she'd sent it in a week earlier, and so that her apology.
Why do you send a first draft into the Observer
a week early, and then then she sent it again 3 hours later?
And why did your first draft deny racism?
It just doesn't. Yeah, of course. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. Her apology, and again, the Guardian. It went through the process. It went through the editors. No one for that week said. There was a thing called the Holocaust. You might want to have a look at and maybe redo it. So this is the frustration, is that it's amongst the world that I grew up in, the world I live in, of people on the left who just cannot face this stuff.
But Keir Starmer, Labour Party, immediately suspended Diane Abbott.
Yes,
right?
so there are people now, but it's taken so much. But there are still people clinging on, certainly the people on the far left, who just, they're so entrenched within their own worthiness and goodness that they cannot accept that they could in any way have anything to do with racism themselves.
So is it not the case that racism of all forms can exist irrespective of people's political leaning? I mean, surely that's...
Well, surely, yeah. I
know.
mean, I couldn't possibly say, no, it can't exist. Of course it could exist.
But I think people, if you position yourself as being on the right side of history, as a lot of people on the left do, and they say, well, you can do no wrong, it means you end up excusing really terrible things, I think.
I guess so, because they just can't let in. If they let out a crack of imperfection, then there's going to be a lot more to follow. Yeah, I think so.
Well, absolutely astonishing stuff. OK, we're going to get another question now. This one's from Jilly.
Yes,
Hello, Jilly.
Good evening, Andrew. Should you be responsible for the actions of family members from hundreds of years ago?
Oh, I hope not. My ancestors were appalling. Did all sorts of things. No, this is, again, this is from The Guardian, again, of course. They've discovered that direct ancestors of King Charles and the royal family bought and exploited enslaved people on tobacco plantations in Virginia. So they've been trawling through and finding out all of the various things. My question here, Cressida, is why did you have to do that study? It's obviously the case. We're all descended from people who were involved in slavery in one way or another. Everyone. Yeah, and the royal family, especially aristocrats. Are you kidding me? Why bother?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all knew. Was anybody shocked? I wasn't shocked. And also direct. I mean, it's not that direct, is it? It's a fairly long way off. But of course, it's exactly what you'd expect to find. And when you say why, well, Charles he's interested in this, isn't it? He's peddling it. So.
Yes, and that's a very good point. He's sort of encouraging this. But I come back to this point now. If you're going to go back into the past and find everyone's ancestors, none of us are innocent. And we're all a combination of people who were enslaved or slavers. You know,
yeah, exactly. The people who have both. Yeah, people have both of them. So yeah, I mean, I think they're like, he's got a direct to this person from 1686 or something, and I sort of did the maths, and it's about 2,000. So he's got 2,000 direct descendants from that time, and one of those 2,000 people had this slave plantation. Now that's terrible, that's unethical. That was hundreds of years ago, but the idea that this 1 in 2,000 somehow, what does it do? Does it seep into his genes? Does it intrinsically now make him evil?
Well, I come to what's the point? You see, because all those people from the 1600s, they're dead. They've been dead for ages. So we can't really get them to apologise. And him apologising for something he didn't do seems a bit pointless to me. You know, if I apologise for something my great-grandfather did, what would be the point in that?
Yeah, I mean, I can apologise for my dad when he got drunk and vomited at... Well, that's fair enough.
As you should, because it was very embarrassing.
Yeah, it was. I'm not bringing him to the office again.
Yeah.
But yes, at some point, the line is broken.
And then what do you do when you find these connections, you know? Because then we get into the questions about reparations. But who do you give the money to? I mean, I'd say that the British royal family did an awful lot to oppress my ancestors. Can I get some cash? Because I can do with it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to go to individuals, is it?
Why?
I think...
Well, no, that's what they're talking about in America. They're saying that in America, I think it's San Francisco, they're talking about giving, like, $1 million to every person who's found to be a descendant.
Well, I think there's been murmurings of Charles giving money to charities that are somehow, not my words, they're somehow related.
Right.
But yeah, it's a brilliant question. How do you distribute the money? And as you say, if you've got some ancestry without any guilt and some with, what do you do then? Just write yourself a cheque? I
just think it's impossible to quantify, isn't it? Yeah. Pay yourself. Reparations to yourself. Interesting question. We've got another question now from Alec. Where is Alec?
Hi there.
Hi, Alec.
I'm wondering, should the government control what we see online?
Yes. So this broke this week. This was Justin Trudeau, who, as you know, is the Canadian Prime Minister, often seen in blackface. You'll have seen some of those videos. And yet he got voted back in. Goodness knows why. But he has passed this internet censorship bill. This goes back years, by the way, Bill C-11. They've been talking about this for a long, long time. They want to clamp down in much the same way that our country is with their online safety bill. But Canada's sort of pushed it through. The Canadian government has always been quite bad on free speech. And they tried to introduce another bill, Bill C-16, which was trying to force people to... which was a compelled speech idea, that people had to use the preferred pronouns of someone. And it's one thing censoring someone, but another making them say something. Yeah. You don't want a government like Canada sort of saying what you can and cannot read online, surely.
Well, no, and especially as he's sort of saying, they were like, oh, no, don't worry about it, it's not going to be used in that way. It's like, no, that's why you need this stuff in law. To just say, no, we're not going to utilise that. But it's like in Scotland when they're like, oh, no, this won't let any male rapists in prison. And then suddenly it turns out there are. So the dangers, this is the whole point of having these laws, of covering all of these angles, so that the thing that's not meant to happen definitely can't happen.
And I don't trust the Canadian government on this sort of stuff. You know, when they had the truckers protesting, it was politicians within the government who were referring to them as fascists. You know, and like, and it's unbelievable. You don't want people like that setting legislation that could curb other people's speech.
Absolutely not, and stopping people being able to get to their own money and things like. I mean, no, keep it clean, keep that relationship clean. I don't want any creep where the government.
Did you see that footage of him, Trudeau, this week, sort of basically? No, we were just kind of encouraging people to not take the vaccine, and there's this sort of backpedaling thing that started.
They were trying to take the money out of their bank accounts.
But this is it. Now it's also no, we would just sort of influence them and stuff like that, and it's like. Wow, history being rewritten.
That's the chief technique, isn't it? The rewriting of history. That's what I absolutely can't stand. Just admit to the mistakes, you know, it's amazing. Anyway, so we're going to move on now to a question from John. Hello, John.
Should classic movies be changed for modern audiences?
OK, I'm quite pleased about this because, you know, the direction of travel seems to be that a lot of people are sort of saying, let's cut out scenes from old films if they're now offensive. Let's, you know, cut out chapters of old books if they're offensive, that kind of thing. But Steven Spielberg has said that re-editing films is a mistake. And he's actually even applied this to himself because I think the guns that some of the officers in E.T. have been re-digitised and they're now walkie-talkies, and he says that was a mistake. So I'm quite pleased that someone as big and important as Steven Spielberg is saying, look, it's possible for films to date and for us to see that they're now offensive, but we're not stupid. We know the things made in the past were in the past.
Absolutely, and he's going to. I understand he's now going to change it back as well for the next anniversary.
Is he?
Yeah. So that. Changing your mind is a sign of intelligence.
Yeah.
And he's obviously a very talented and intelligent human being. He's reconsidered his position.
Yeah.
And he's come out and said, I was wrong. And that's a fantastic thing to do.
I mean, I sort of think it's OK for you to change your own creation, right? So I think... Like when Roald Dahl changed, with the original Oompa Loompas were black, and he decided that was offensive, so he changed that.
So Jews.
That's right. But then the new changes that have come in have been by people in the publishing house after he's long dead. That's a difference, isn't it?
That is a difference. I mean, the thing that I'm really concerned is I just want to hear about George Lucas changing the scene in Star Wars where Greedo shoots first.
Oh, yeah. Well,
this is the one that's upset me for the last...
This is a very nerdy point you're making. Some people won't know this.
It's really cool, man.
No, well, of course, George Lucas went back and added lots of extra monsters and things, and it looks really stupid.
Talking to the wrong person. What I think is really exciting is that it's Spielberg who's saying this.
Yeah, it is.
Most of what we've heard about sensitivity stuff and editing, it's all from people who aren't actually experts at their craft.
Yes.
You know, and he's come out and he is the person I would want to edit stuff, and he's saying don't do it.
Yeah,
so.
Very interesting. We've got time for one more question. This is from Abdi. Where's Abdi?
Hello.
Hiya.
Hi. Have protests become too violent?
OK, so a Let Women Speak women's rights event took place at Hyde Park this afternoon. They meet there every week, you might have seen. A large police presence, but it did turn violent after some trans activists clashed with some of the women there. But what they've actually done is attacked one of the female stewards. And there were reports online that they'd wrapped her in a flag and beaten her. And there she is, and the police are pulling the victim away. And she has been physically assaulted. Now, this is something we're seeing more and more at these kind of events, particularly events where women gather under the Let Women Speak banner and lots of people arrive to stop them from speaking, which might be proving their point ever so much.
Well, I wouldn't say it's happening more and more. This has happened for years now, and actually seeing a video very similar to that from about 7 years ago of a trans woman beating a lesbian. And you're going, and I didn't understand it at all at the time. I was like, what's going on here? And the thing is, people were defending the trans woman for beating this lesbian up.
Yes.
For merely saying that there are two sexes and whatnot. And that's what involved me in this. It just seemed so insanely unfair. But you have in New Zealand, you had this 72-year-old, again, a lesbian woman being punched repeatedly in the face by a man. And he's on the right side of history. Like, how does that work?
This is the problem. That was at the Kelly J. Keane Let Women Speak event in New Zealand, and all of the people who claim to be progressive were saying, "Isn't this wonderful?" And look how one of these activists is compassionately beating an elderly woman around the head.
It's just so ludicrous, isn't it? And it's so emotionally immature. That sort of childish, I can't get my way, I'm going to explode. You know, there is no debate. That's one of their slogans.
And this is something I'm going to be talking to my guest Scott Nugent in a bit, because I do feel with this debate now, It's just become so infantile, but also that people turn to violence and are praised for it.
Yeah, but who are the people who are being violent here? The trans activists, basically, who a lot of them, if some of those are trans women, they're, biological men. It's testosterone. They're proving their point. You're not seeing these women, these gender-critical women, attacking these men.
No, that's not happening.
That's what I'm saying. It's a one-way side. The violence goes one way in this matter. And this is very interesting. At these events that these women... I actually went to one last year because I was afraid of this violence happening. I wanted to be there as a man because there wasn't a police presence there at the time. But they very cleverly, they get women to be the stewards because they know that women are better at... because if I saw a woman being beaten up, I'm sorry, I wouldn't not be able to stop myself from getting involved. Yeah. But having women who are very brave being stewards in front of with people who are much larger than them, physically larger and aggressive, is they're commended.
Well, when Kelly J. Keane was being surrounded in the event in New Zealand, and you just thought, if it weren't for those stewards, she could have been killed. Oh, yeah. Because it was a large group of angry, scary men attacking her.
Well, it's what happens at football matches, isn't it? Crushes, terrible disasters, that's how it starts.
Yeah, but we do have to start taking a stand against this stuff. I think it's really, really important.
I think so. I mean...
someone's going to get killed at some point. This is scary stuff. Anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, has the government betrayed Brexit? We're going to be speaking to a former Conservative and UKIP MP in just over 2 minutes' time. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway...
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my common sense crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So earlier this year, Rishi Sunak pledged to scrap 4,000 European Union laws by the end of the year. However, this week, Trade Secretary Kemi Badenoch said that only 20% of those laws, just 800, were likely to be scrapped by December 31st. So the question is this a betrayal of Brexit? To discuss this, let's head to the United States and to the co-founder of Vote Leave, former Conservative Party and UKIP MP, Douglas Carswell. Douglas, thanks very much for joining us tonight. So maybe you can answer that question. Is it a betrayal?
I think Brexit is being betrayed. Ever since the majority of people in Britain voted to leave the European Union, the political establishment, first of all, wouldn't accept the result. We had to have a series of elections for them to honour the referendum result. Now we have a government that pays lip service to Brexit, but they're doing nothing to take advantage of the opportunities of Brexit. Here you have an example of 4,000 EU rules, which we were required to follow when we were in the EU. We were promised that we were going to review and remove them, and yet we now hear that 80% of them are going to be retained. Why are they going to be retained? Because the minister, Kemi Badenoch, who incidentally I used to think was one of the good guys in this, the minister, Kemi Badenoch, has been told by her civil servants that they don't want to get rid of them. Well, excuse me, is this government run by a Brussels-loving bureaucracy or by Conservative ministers that we voted for to deliver on Brexit? I'm afraid to say I don't think this government is doing really that much at all to take advantage of the opportunities of Brexit. If anything, actually, this government is making things worse. It is gold-plating rules, creating more regulation, and ensuring that Britain is no longer a good place to do business. It is a tragedy.
So you raise a number of points there, Douglas, but I want to pick you up on this point about the civil service. Is it the case that the civil service is just completely enamoured by EU red tape to the extent that they're going to interfere? Aren't the civil service supposed to be politically neutral? And if they're not, why is it not the case that the government isn't doing anything about that?
The British civil service is absolutely not neutral. They will pay lip service to the fact that they don't get involved in party politics, but they have very clear preferences. And their preferences is always in favour of regulation. The idea that we should somehow deregulate is anathema to them. It's some years since there was that very famous comedy, Yes, Minister. And that was a comedy that showed the tension between a minister and a civil servant, with the civil servant invariably getting his way. It's not a joke anymore. This is how government is run. You have a minister coming in to their department, and they are encased in this bureaucracy that simply doesn't give them the opportunities and the options to do anything that the bureaucracy doesn't want. Now, it takes a pretty exceptional kind of minister to have the resources and the ability to cut through that. Imagine if you were running a government department that employed 10, 20, 30,000 people. You don't have the ability to hire and fire a single one. If, like Dominic Raab, you try to use a bit of robust persuasion to get the civil servants to do what you ask them, they can undermine you and get you sacked, which is exactly what happened. In effect, ministers are simply the mouthpiece of the permanent bureaucracy. And it is the permanent bureaucracy that is running this country, that is making, I think, some catastrophic policy errors. And one of those real errors is a failure to take advantage of the opportunities that Brexit was supposed to be all about.
Can I ask you specifically about this question of laws and EU regulations? Notoriously, they're very difficult to pinpoint in terms of how many of our laws originate in the EU. Some experts put it as high as 62%, others as low as 13%. No one seems to know what these laws are. Can you explain why it's important that we get these laws off our statute books?
I'll give you a specific example of the so-called GDPR, the data protection regulations. We signed up to those when we were in the EU, basically because a German apparatchik in Brussels wanted to impose German regulations on the rest of Europe. As a consequence of doing so, anyone who complies with GDPR regulation is now falling dramatically behind some of the tech innovation that is now happening around the world. I'm talking to you from the United States, where we don't have GDPR. One of the great advantages of not having GDPR, it allows small retailers to take advantage of some of the marketing tools that social media platforms and the opportunities that they offer, and allows them to compete with big players in pretty much any field. In Europe, Small operators can't do this. The rules are rigged in favour of big corporations and big corporate online marketing. Now, we should have got rid of GDPR rules. If we did that, it would help small businesses, it would help the little guy, it would help the local independent florist or whatever it is compete against the big corporations. Not getting rid of these rules means that Europe as a whole and Britain, because it's aligned with these regulations, is simply not growing. The European Union and Britain...
That's a very important point that you raise about the pro-corporate nature of the EU, and a lot of the time I think that discussion isn't really being had. I know you've written in your book Rebel about this, the way in which corporations, lobby the EU at the detriment to smaller businesses. But is that something that you think people just aren't aware of?
Absolutely. I mean, Brussels is basically a nexus between big business interests and bureaucracy, and they love working together because bureaucracy is used by big businesses to rig the rules. Leaving the EU meant we were supposed to change this and deal with it. It's really depressing to see a so-called conservative administration carry on doing what we would pretty much do if we were in the European Union, failing to take advantage of the opportunities, and then somehow pretending that they're delivering on Brexit. They're simply not.
But it would seem to me that every Conservative Prime Minister, and there's been a few since Brexit now, they've all treated Brexit as really a case of damage limitation rather than trying to find the opportunity. Would you say that's right?
I would. I mean, I remember in the run-up to the referendum campaign being sort of in the bunker, the vote leave bunker. And there weren't many people around. And I certainly can't remember many of the current cabinet who now claim that somehow they are Brexit champions. I think many of them fundamentally from Theresa May onwards haven't really understood the point of Brexit. They think it's all about being rude about foreigners. They think it's all about, controlling immigration, not that they've even managed to do that. But, ministers talk about controlling the English Channel. They can't even control their own departments. We see with what happened to Dominic Raab, the civil service is in control. Britain is never going to get its act together until we have a Conservative administration that comes in and treats the permanent mandarinate in Britain the way Margaret Thatcher treated the National Union of Miners. Unless we take on this vested interest in Whitehall and defeat it, Britain will always be governed by mediocrity.
Douglas Carswell, thanks very much for joining me. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, has therapy gone woke? I'm going to be joined by a leading clinical psychologist and psychotherapist. See you in 2 minutes.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Later in the show, I'll be turning agony uncle with the help of my wonderful panel, Josh Howie and Cressida Wetton. We're going to help you deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So do email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk. If you've got any problems whatsoever, we're going to help you out, apparently. Anyway, cynical therapies, perspectives on the anti-therapeutic nature of critical social justice. A new book edited by writer and psychotherapist Dr. Val Thomas sets out the apparent activist turn that professional psychotherapy has taken in recent years. It details that therapy has come to be shaped by critical social justice ideology and is no longer a client-centred, politically neutral practice. So to speak about this in more detail, I'm delighted to welcome clinical psychologist Dr. Carol Sherwood and psychotherapist Ben Harris. Thank you both for joining us. Now, Carol, I'm going to come to you first. Can you just describe... This is an interesting book. It combines many, many different authors and perspectives on this problem, a problem that a lot of people won't even understand exists.
Yeah, that's very true, Andrew, and that's why I'm really glad we've had the opportunity to come and talk to you and your viewers and listeners tonight. I think there can't be many areas of life that aren't touched by critical social justice ideology, and therapy is no exception. And this is a worry, because people who seek help from a therapist are generally at a low ebb. They're distressed, they may have anxiety or depression, and what they need is somebody who's prepared to treat them as a unique individual, to actually sit with them, to be compassionate and non-judgmental. But what we're getting now are activist therapists, and activist therapists have a political agenda. They want to impose their political views on their clients. So if you come along to see one of these activist therapists, what they will do is, rather than treat you as a unique individual, they will categorise you as a member of a majority group or a member of a minority group.
So that's something we should clarify, is that what we call critical social justice, more colloquially known as wokeism. We're talking about a mindset that sees everyone, first and foremost, in terms of group identity rather than individual. And surely, when it comes to therapy, the individual is surely what matters most.
You would think so, and indeed it has been for many, many years, even from the time of Freud. But now, because this is a political endeavour, the therapists who are meant to be helping the individual are actually trying to change society. It's like a form of social engineering. And so what they will do is, if they label you as a privileged person, then they will give you a moral re-education. They'll tell you you're racist or you're a member of the patriarchy and this has to change. Or if you're perceived as a member of an oppressed group, a minority, then you'll be guided towards political activism yourself.
Now, this is very interesting, and I'm going to bring Ben in on this because we've seen this in many, many fields, particularly academia, but even in secondary education, even primary education, where activists become teachers, and then they will teach the children that if they are white, they are complicit in white supremacy, whether they like it or not, etc. Things like this. A very simplistic, reductive worldview. But it's in therapy. You know, people have been surprised that it's come into medicine in that area at all, but therapy?
Well, that's right, isn't it? I mean, therapy, one might traditionally think of it as being a very nuanced activity, very nuanced practice that, as Carol says, thinks about individuals. What we're really seeing, I think, is a tragedy. I don't think it's unfair to use that word. You know, maybe you could find a way to think about critical theory in a more nuanced way, but quite often the way it's used is it sort of destroys the traditional understanding that therapeutic modalities are built up, decolonisation breaks down in the training institutes the ideas that therapy is made of. and it replaces it with this, what I think of as this very flat way of thinking about things. So there are black and white ideas, good and bad people. Therapy traditionally, when you come to therapy, it's about recognising responsibility, that you've got some role in the problems that you've got, that the world is grey, that it's not black and white.
So you can't do that if the person diagnosing you or treating you divides you into either an oppressed or an oppressor class.
Absolutely right. And, you know, maybe your audience, people at home, might want to think about what is it that is meaningful for them in life. I mean, for most people, I'm pretty sure it's not political activism. And what this seeks to do is to say that you've got to think about yourself in terms of these oppressor and oppressed classes, and then you've got to do something about it. Therapy is about healing and growth. That's what it should be about, right? It's not about telling people how they need to focus their life, telling they need to be activists. But unfortunately, this tragedy that is happening is that the therapists who are convinced by this, they become their own kind of form of moral narcissists. They impose their values on their clients. You know, when I was trained, it was absolutely clear that's not what you're doing as a therapist. Right?
No, I mean, surely a therapist who is effectively trying to recruit for an activist cause is effectively blaming the patient for their privilege and saying they need to proactively go out into society and change it for the better. Exactly. Can that person really be said to be a therapist at all?
No, not at all. And that's why we've called this book Perspectives on the Anti-Therapeutic Nature of Critical Social Justice. It's not therapy.
Can I just ask, though, is this just the case that lots of activists have come into the profession and they now dominate, or has it come from those who are training the therapists? Has it come? Are the roots a bit more deeper?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it comes from several different sources. Yes, there are activists who wish to become therapists. So it's a grassroots movement amongst some young people who want to be activist therapists. But also there are governmental organisations like NHS Health Education England who are imposing anti-racism, as it's so called, and decolonisation on clinical psychology training courses.
And we should probably clarify that, because anti-racism sounds great because we're all against racism, but that's not what it means, is it?
No, it isn't what it means. And it's critical race theory. And it was interesting. I heard you talking earlier about Diane Abbott's letter. That is an example of critical race theory in action. Because
Can you explain that?
Yes, sure. Because what it is saying is that however disadvantaged a white person may be, they are incapable of experiencing racism because of the colour of their skin.
So we can see how that kind of approach, that critical race theorist approach, actually generates a hyper-racialised, divisive worldview. And this is important, isn't it, Ben? Because one of the main tenets of critical race theory and anti-racism is you have to be proactively anti-racist. It's not good enough not to be racist. You have to stop others from being racist. You have to detect it, often where it isn't. You know, so this has got nothing to do with therapy, surely.
Well, that's right. And, of course, if you think about that idea of needing to detect it in other people and then sort of neutralise it or fix them, then you're setting up a kind of paradigm around power, which is, of course, what they're interested in. They say that power lies elsewhere and they're trying to rectify things. But if you're trying to tell your client how to fix themselves in this sort of morally determinative way, you're imposing your power on your client.
But surely there are lots of therapists who aren't going along with this and who are actually doing a very good job. And so what's the extent of this?
Well, that's hard to tell, and that's because people have been quite quiet about this. It's why this book is very important, because it's really the first sort of organised coming together of a group of highly experienced practitioners, clinical psychologists, psychotherapists, academics, to talk about this, to offer differing critiques of what's going on, different ways of analysing it. We are starting to see a bit of pushback in the journals as well. There was a paper in the European Journal of Psychotherapy recently questioning from a different angle than one I would take, but starting to talk about these questions. So what we're starting to see is a little bit more of people sort of piping up a bit. And that's what we want to encourage. Carol and I want to encourage colleagues to start to think about this and start to talk about it, to understand that what appears to be a sort of very simple positive thing on the surface, actually, like everything else in life, it has drawbacks, right? We need to be aware that anything that you push has a dark side as well as a light side.
And this is difficult, isn't it? Because whenever this ideology infects any particular institution, it's quite unforgiving to those who don't go along with it. And that surely means that it is going to get worse and worse in therapy.
I think that's right. And, I mean, you've seen examples. There's Amy Gallagher and there's James Esses, both excellent psychotherapy trainees who have been thrown out of their training courses because they've dared to express a view that doesn't accord.
Well, Amy Gallagher was on this show and, you know, She was thrown off her course because she refused to confess to her racism, because she says, I'm not racist.
Yes.
Right? So what on earth has that got to do with training to be a therapist?
Well, I think this is what we're asking in the book. It hasn't got
this weird kind of struggle session where you've got to confess to something you didn't know you were guilty of.
Exactly. And if you see that's happening to trainees, just imagine what it's going to be like when you're actually seeing patients.
Yes, very scary stuff. Well, this is, it's called Cynical Therapies, edited by Dr. Val Thomas. It's a fascinating book. You should check that out. Thank you, Carol and Ben, for coming onto the show. Really appreciate it. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, are universities against civilised debate? We're going to be joined by writer and campaigner Raquel Rosario Sanchez after a controversial move by the University of Bristol this week. See you in just 2 minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. The University of Bristol has banned the public from a Feminist Society's event with a lawyer critical of the controversial charity Stonewall. When students invited Akira Reindorf to the event, it prompted bosses to limit who attended and asked Women Talk Back, the group behind the debate, to cover half of the security costs. With the event on the brink of being cancelled, the Free Speech Union funded a venue off campus. Education Minister Claire Coutinho has led the backlash to the conditions imposed by the university. She said, learning how to have civil discussions about things we disagree upon is central to the university experience. You would have thought so. Anyway, writer and campaigner Raquel Rosario Sanchez, who organised the talk, joins me now in the studio. Welcome to the show. So, Raquel, we should probably start at the beginning. So you organised this event through your feminist society.
Absolutely.
And this is Akko Reindorf, who is a lawyer who had previously criticised the University of Essex for their decision to no platform certain academics, one of whom, Joe Phoenix, was on this show. So you wanted to hear her speak, effectively.
Yes, it was simply an event with lawyers, barristers and solicitors to talk about women's rights. And there was nothing, it wasn't an event to talk specifically about trans issues, it was about women's rights. And we thought, when we've organised other events before that have been open to the public, and when we organised one that was just lawyers, we thought it was going to be a straightforward process and that it was going to be so easy. And this was the most challenging event that we have put together because it was very clear early on that the university did not want us there.
And they've said that this is to do with security, right? Now, this often when we get these no platformings, these people being disinvited, security seems to be the excuse.
Yes, it seems that senior management at universities and also student unions, like, they're just looking for excuses to make sure that free speech does not take place. So they go through a long list of restrictions to see what can we put in place to make sure that this doesn't go ahead. And in our event, they claim that there could be backlash and public disorder from the students' trans activists. And my response is like, well, control your trans activists, you know, control your students to make sure that the event goes ahead, and that didn't happen.
But surely there must be some kind of punishment for students that kick off, shall we say. If they're going to cause a violent spectacle, they're the problem.
I would say so, but, you know, based on my own experience as a student at the University of Bristol and what we have witnessed trans activist students do inside and outside campus, the university really has sympathies with the protesters and not with everyone else. And to the point that they have gone to court and argued that they do not have a duty of care to those people who are targeted, for example, feminists like me. Instead, they have a duty of care to everyone else.
So that's very much the university taking a side
Yes.
on that particular ideological issue.
Yes.
Whereas, of course, they've got a duty to care to everyone, you would have thought.
I would have thought.
Why, though, Akko Reindorf, a lawyer, why is this individual so controversial to the activists?
I have no idea. And you know what? On Friday night, because we were able to find a second venue, we have two scenarios taking place in Bristol. We had a meeting, a sensible, somber meeting with feminist lawyers talking about women's rights. Akko's speech was about migrant women and the exploitation that they often face and how they're incredibly vulnerable. I mean, it had nothing to do with controversy. So we were able to hold this event. It was a lively discussion. It was women engaging, the public engaging. And then on the other side, we had trans activist students roaming around the campus of the University of Bristol looking for women to abuse. And instead of supporting the lawyers and the women who are just trying to meet to talk about their rights, the university sides with the protesters.
So, is this related to the report that Akko Reindorf wrote about Stonewall when it came to the University of Essex deplatforming two academics because of threats from trans activists? Akko Reindorf wrote that actually they were wrong in their decision and that they shouldn't have deplatformed this, and also that Stonewall might have misled them to believe that they should be deplatforming people for reasons of equality. Is that what this is really about?
The layers of irony in this story are just too much, you know, because you would have thought, like, well, we thought that the university would be proud that, oh, students brought Akko Reindorf and these amazing lawyers who are highly respectable women at the top of their profession, but it turns out that they felt something else, you know? And I think that the irony is really interesting because trans activist organizations like the controversial charity Mermaids, which is currently being investigated by the Charity Commission, they have been on campus, open to the public, having all of these events with the liberty that they should be having this event. But meanwhile, feminists trying to meet to discuss their rights, somehow we are beyond the pale and restrictions have to be put in place.
So it's interesting. I mean, I'm all for peaceful protest. I think people should be able to protest for whatever they want. But when it comes to threatening and harassment and abuse and shutting things down forcibly, that's, as far as I'm concerned, takes a step too far. Is there just a major problem with free speech on campuses now?
Absolutely. And I think that what happened on Friday with respect to the University of Bristol is an example that before it used to be, well, you have feminists who advocate for sex-based rights and trans activist protesters. but the universities are trying to just like keep this balance. Now there is no balance. Now it is academic institutions clearly siding with people who want to shut down free speech and the freedom of assembly of women.
And like you say, when you have these other groups, they're not attacked, they're not abused, and they're not shut down.
And obviously women are not going to go to those events trying to shut it down. We enable those discussions. We want people to talk about trans rights the way that they see fit. We want to encourage a climate in which these topics can take place. But the other side of the debate, they do not want debate to take place. And they want not only to shut down conversations about trans rights, but shut down conversations about women's rights in general in the law, which is what our event was about.
And do you see things getting better anytime soon?
I thought that they would be better. I genuinely thought, I have been organizing events and trying to do my work and my activism at the University of Bristol for a number of years, and I genuinely thought that things would improve and be better. And I'm taken aback, and I'm surprised that it seems that things have become more contentious and worse.
Raquel Rosario Sanchez, thanks so much for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it. So, a University of Bristol spokesperson has said, "We are firmly committed to upholding freedom of speech and welcome members of our community to invite a wide range of speakers onto our campus. We also have a duty to ensure events are carried out in a safe manner which doesn't endanger others." The spokesperson added, "The event was approved, but as related Women Talk Back events have previously attracted significant protest and disorder, we decided additional security was required and that admission should be restricted to staff and students only." So that's their statement in the interests of balance. But look, it's time now for a break. But please do not go anywhere. There is so much more to come between now and 9 o'clock. We have got an interview with Scott Nugent, a woman who transitioned to a trans man at the age of 42. And Scott has had to recover from several near-death experiences during the process and will be revealing all in the next hour. And is the Scottish Government mounting an elitist assault on the justice system? We'll also be talking again to our panel and getting some questions from our lovely studio audience. See you in a few minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a few days' time, King Charles III will be crowned in a ceremony that punctuates our history. We won't just be focusing on the pomp and circumstance, because the coronation was also about conquest, rebellion, and murder. In it, our liberties are consecrated.
Next week, a special edition of Farage with Professor David Starkey. The Crown, a 1,000-year story on GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, including questions from our viewers, and we're going to be speaking to Scott Nugent, who transitioned to a trans man 6 years ago. Scott survived several near-death experiences and tells his story shortly. But now, it's the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's get you up to date with the headlines from the GB newsroom. British nationals hoping to flee the fighting in Sudan are being urged to catch an extra flight leaving for the UK tomorrow. It will depart from the eastern city of Port Sudan, where earlier the first shipment of humanitarian aid arrived for the millions of people trapped in the capital, Khartoum. Those hoping to leave are being told to get to the international airport before midday. British Navy ships have also docked in Port Sudan to support the evacuation efforts. Rival military forces, though, have accused each other of fresh violations of a ceasefire as the deadly conflict continues for a third week. The Health Secretary says the 28-hour nursing strike is premature and disrespectful to other unions. The Royal College of Nursing are walking out, having rejected the latest government offer. The strike is starting now at 8 o'clock. However, the RCN says national exemptions are in place to provide critical care during the strike, following talks with NHS England. The public are being urged to use the NHS wisely. Steve Barclay, though, says he's hopeful this dispute can be resolved when health unions, employers and government representatives meet later this week.
The Staff Council is due to meet on Tuesday. I'm cautiously optimistic that the Staff Council will agree to then vote in favour of the deal. But I think it's right to wait until Tuesday for the Staff Council to meet. And this strike is premature. I think it's disrespectful to the other trade unions. I think the RCN should have waited. They're a member of the Staff Council. They were part of the negotiations. And as I say, Pat Cullen herself recommended this deal to her members.
Liz Truss is disputing a government bill related to her use of a grace and favour country house while she was Foreign Secretary. The former Prime Minister has been asked to pay back around £12,000 for costs incurred at the Chevening estate in Kent. It covers the period last summer when she was fighting the Conservative leadership campaign against Rishi Sunak. The bill was largely for hospitality, but also included some missing items such as bathrobes. Ms Truss says she'll replace those, and it mostly relates to official government business rather than personal expenses. The man suspected of killing 5 of his neighbours, including an 8-year-old boy on Friday, could be anywhere by now, according to authorities in Texas. Police believe Francisco Oropeza attacked the family next door after being asked to stop firing a semi-automatic weapon in his garden. Police have widened the search area to a 20-mile radius around the town of Cleveland. That's to the north of Houston. The suspect, who's Mexican, is believed to have fled the United States. And the British Army's begun rehearsals for the coronation. Next weekend, soldiers from all divisions of the armed forces have gathered at areas across South London to prepare for the ceremonial event. Soldiers have flown home from operational duty from as far afield as Cyprus, Iraq and Kenya to represent their regiments and corps at the event. On TV, online, DAB plus TuneIn Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Free Speech Nation.
back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. So, we've got a wonderful studio audience here. Let's get some questions from them. Our first one is from Paul. Paul, hello.
Hi, Andrew. Should I leave valuable items in my shed?
Well, I mean, that's very much up to you, Paul. But this is about the recent police policy, which means that thefts from sheds and outbuildings, they're no longer going to be recorded as home break-ins. And this is since 2017, police in England and Wales have considered any domestic burglary to include not just the house, but obviously all the buildings around the house, but that's now been changed. Cressida, what do you make of this one?
After everybody's had a lockdown, everybody's working from home and got their laptop stored in the shed.
Who puts their laptop in a shed?
Well, I've got a friend, he spends all his time in his shed now. That's his special working, the man cave, but now it's 24/7.
But this means that anything that gets stolen from your shed, that's not really theft?
Well, it's not a domestic burglary, is it?
What is it then?
I don't know. That's a really good question.
So look, the thing is, though, Josh, so many people, when people break into the house, they don't bother calling the police now because they know nothing's going to be done. You just get a number, And, we had someone break into our house and nothing, smashed the window. Nothing happened. So, is this a good idea now to sort of limit the amount of investigation?
It's a genius idea, so to not have to hold the police to account to do their job, because they're just going to lessen the quality. So soon it'll be only if they stole diamonds from the house.
Yes.
That's technically a burglary. And then also if they're wearing a stripy shirt.
Yes.
Then technically that's the only thing that's burglary.
When I was in New York recently, that's not a boast, I was there and I went into a shop to buy some shampoo, which is a normal item, you would have thought, and it was behind a glass screen. And then I suddenly realised everything under the value of £10 was behind a glass screen. And I found out later that it's because in New York they passed a law that unless the value of the burglary is over $1,000, it doesn't count as a crime. And the reason for that is because so many looters were just going in with the shopping baskets, taking stuff out. And so what's the point of a law? What's the point of law?
Well, the point of law is so that if you break it, there are consequences.
Right.
So what they're doing is lessening the law, aren't they? So we're obviously all in the wrong job. Perhaps we should look into burglary.
We just become thieves.
Yeah, that sounds...
You'd make a very good thief.
Do you think? Thank you.
I do, yeah. I think it's a
trustworthy face.
Exactly, that's the thing. And an evil laugh as well, yeah. They'd never know. OK, we're going to move on to another question. This one's from Barry. Where's Barry? How are you, Barry?
Hello. Are we set for a Biden-Trump rematch?
Oh, yeah, this is fun. So this week, Biden, as we knew that was going to happen, he's formally launched his campaign for a second term. Of course, Donald Trump did that about 4 years ago, and so we know that they're both running. It's deja vu. It's happening all over again. But apparently, a lot of people are losing interest in America. They're bored.
I think it's only 6% of Americans want to see a rematch between the two. And, Biden's 80 years old, Trump is 76. It's two people, I don't want to be ageist or anything, although, is it The Guardian? I read an article that said, two white men against each other. It's just like, look,
well, that's The Guardian.
Assuming that Biden makes it, because if he doesn't, then we'll have a woman of colour.
That's a very negative view.
Well, but it is true, isn't it?
I mean, he's 80 years old, anything could happen. Thanks for that note.
Anything could happen to any of us, but, he's...
But there is something, Americans like their elderly statesmen, don't they? They trust them more. But this is, it does seem bizarre to me that the Republicans don't get Ron DeSantis. Because if you put Ron DeSantis against Biden... That's. I mean, it's a no contest then, isn't it?
Yeah, at the moment, from most polls, it seems like Biden is. If he was against Trump, he would win.
Yes.
And even though,
but if he's against DeSantis, who can actually speak?
No, absolutely, yeah. Someone with a bit of vitality and whatever. Yeah.
Someone with a pulse, which Biden doesn't have.
But still, the Republican Party is terrified of Trump.
I don't understand it. He keeps...
Well, they're doing self-damage.
I would have liked to have seen a Hillary-Trump rematch. That would have been quite interesting, I think. That would have been more fun, wouldn't it?
It would be fun to watch, yeah.
But, it just strikes me as hopeless, I don't know why Biden is even running again. I suppose it's because he did so well in the midterms.
Well, he did well in the midterms. He's run for president 4 times. He's in there now. He doesn't want to give up. And maybe, believe it or not, part of him thinks that he could do good.
But, come on, he was in Ireland the other week and he mixed up the All Blacks with the Black and Tans. That's quite a... this is not someone...
started taking him off now. We've seen Trump practically doing a sort of tight 5 stand-up minutes. Yeah.
It's just going to be a ridiculous election, isn't it? Oh, God. Oh, well, anyway, let's move on to another question. This one's from Pete. Where is Pete?
Andrew.
Hello.
Will the 5-day working week become a thing of the past?
Yeah, I'm quite interested in this because, just to give you some background to this, so this is South Cambridgeshire Council, and they're thinking to they're going to extend their trial on the 4-day working week for another 12 months after they've had what they call an overwhelmingly positive response. This was tried out. By the way, I saw a study that was tried out similar to this in Australia in a corporation, and they tried a 4-day working week, and it turns out the employees were just as productive within 4 days, but with only 4 days rather than 5, and their mental health was better because they're working less. Is this just a no-brainer? Should we all be just working 4 days a week? What do you think?
I would say yes, but it's still quite funny, isn't it? That the council have worked 20% less and then said, oh, we've done exactly the same amount of work. I mean, it's funny.
But isn't the point that so many people in work aren't really working all the time? I mean, isn't that just the case? Like, most people, a lot of the time, they're just wasting time.
I'm pushing for a 2-day week.
Well, yeah. Well, there's this phenomenon of people actually taking second jobs while they've got a full-time job because they've got so much spare time.
Well, there is a nationwide study as well that did exactly this and everything came out positive.
Yeah.
As you say, mental health and whatnot. But also, it does save money because they've got a lot of vacancies that would be more likely to fill up these vacancies, have permanent staff instead of temporary staff, which would save them, they said, like £1 million. So there's lots of different reasons to do it.
I think it's a great idea. Also, people's quality of life will be so much better if they have 3 days at home. They're spending more time with the family, which in some people's case is a good thing. You know, I think more of that, I think, is great. Why not? Anyway, we're going to move on now to another question. This one is from Alan. Do we have an Alan?
Yeah, hi there, Andrew.
Hi, Alan.
The question is the UK a racist country?
Now, so this question comes up again and again because there are all sorts of studies, but there's been a new study, and this is by the Policy Institute of King's College, and that's found that the UK is one of the world's least racist countries. The study actually found Britain to be in the bottom 4 of the 24 countries asked whether they would want to live next door to someone of a different race or next to immigrants or foreign workers. Now, this is interesting because all of the studies do point, again and again, we've had many, many, many studies of this kind over the years, and they always come back with the same conclusion, that Britain, which is something we all know, isn't it? It's one of the least racist countries on earth, and yet we're also the country where we self-flagellate and call ourselves racist all the time about everything. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist here, because it clearly does. That's mostly in the Labour Party, but, you know, the point is that surely we should accept that we're actually doing pretty well on a global scale. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, is it that also that just other countries are much worse? So they're talking about Iran, Russia, Japan. And it's interesting when you move it, of course, you know, there's the human beings, there's a lot of othering, you know, and that's what people don't... So it's interesting where traditionally left-wing people can't appreciate that there is racism within the people that they see being maligned.
Yes.
And need protected, but actually those people themselves are very racist.
Yes, but why is it, though, when we hear these activists all the time saying that this is a hellish Nazi country? And you know, it just... When the stats don't tell us that, they tell us something very different, that, yes, racism still exists and we should stand up against it and get rid of it, but that... Actually, we're a very inclusive country.
Allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good, isn't it something like that?
That's an interesting phrase.
Thank you. If your utopia is what you think the level should be, then everything else is going to fall short, isn't it?
That's a very good point.
And maybe it's the self-flagellation that's got us to be the least racist country, because it's a hell of a faux pas, isn't it? I mean, I'm amazed that anybody answered this and said, yes, I don't want a person of another race living next door. I mean, who says that?
I find it incredible, because the constant accusations that the country is institutionally racist, and yet to be accused of racism makes you a pariah.
Yeah.
It means you don't get work, which is rightly so. You should be a pariah if you're openly racist. But that in itself sort of puts pay to this idea that we're in this racist hellhole.
Well, I saw an interesting thing online this week, and someone was talking about the curve of... And they were talking about progressive movements in terms of anti-racism or like gay rights, how it sees itself as going in a straight line of progression. Like, that's what you do. You constantly progress. But you reach this sort of peak, and they instead drew it like a hill, where you reach this peak and you get these equal rights, you get this kind of the society that we're striving towards. But because progressives see the journey as never-ending, which is mirroring your point, they keep on going, thinking they're going in a straight line, but actually it starts regressing. And that's what we're seeing.
That's a really interesting point, because then you get people like who are critical race theory is a good example, because when you implement that, what you get is heightened racial division. What you get is the American schools segregating kids by skin colour for after-school activities, which actually happen in London, by the way, and they're doing that in the name of anti-racism. So they keep progressing so much,
And same with gender ideology, how it then becomes homophobic. Like, you have homophobia, you get equal rights, you get marriage, gay marriage, and then suddenly it becomes regressive again.
Yeah.
And now suddenly you should be interested in people. Being interested in people with different genitals is...
Well, I mean, we've got, the CEO of Stonewall comparing lesbians to sexual racists because they don't want to sleep with people with penises. So, that's like an old homophobic trope from back in the day. You haven't found the right guy yet. That goes back from the 70s.
Yeah, well, that's what's happening,
Very good point. OK, we've got another question now. This is from Jackie. Where is Jackie? Hello, Jackie.
Good evening. Should statues be family-friendly?
Oh, yes, I saw this. I was shocked. This statue in Italy, which was a mermaid statue. Nothing wrong with that. We all love mermaids. Do we have an image of this statue? If we do, let's have a look. It's if there are...
I'd be happy to describe it for you. Here we go.
I mean, I was going to say it's not necessarily appropriate, but actually it's in the public square. So,
it certainly is. She doesn't look like a mermaid from the back, does she?
How does she swim? Because surely that puts you off balance, having that kind
Well, she probably just stays on top of the water.
So, for those... If you're listening on radio, this is a mermaid who has enormous breasts and a very large... rear end.
And really, just to reiterate the point, a very human rear end. I mean,
I'm not mocking it or saying... I'm not fat-shaming the mermaid. And it's not a fat mermaid. It's just it's a shapely, curvy mermaid.
Yeah.
Put it back up. Put the image back up.
You've seen it up.
I'd say it might be an unattainable mermaid if there is such a thing.
I think that is an unattainable mermaid. There are people who've had surgery to look like that, you know?
Yeah.
But I just wonder about this. What they're saying, really, is that even the public statuary has to be about representation, and that, people who are more curvy feel left out if they're not represented through the medium of mermaids.
Most women are dressed, aren't they? I mean...
Right, exactly. Most women don't have gills, right? So, I mean, I would suggest...
I mean, it's lovely. I couldn't do it, but neither would I commission it.
I think it's, like you say, it's about representation. That's... representing the very fit mermaids out there.
Is that to your taste, then, Josh? Is that what, that's your kind of thing?
Everything but the tail.
Everything. OK, so Josh's fantasy woman is a dismembered mermaid. Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Is it beautiful anyway as a piece of art?
It's not a beautiful piece of art, no.
I'm not convinced that it is.
No, it's just a bit gaudy. It's more like seaside art, isn't it? Well, I suppose... Yeah, it is. It's like gaudy, fun, saucy postcards, carry-on style.
I suppose it is, yeah.
I think that's what it is. Because there's that famous mermaid in, where is it, in Copenhagen, which is the much more famous statue of a mermaid, and she's not putting it about. You know what I mean? She's a bit more modest, that one.
That's Copenhagen for you.
So
well, there we go.
Victim blaming.
No, I'm not victim blaming. I like my mermaids to just... Anyway. Right, there's enough of that chat. After the break on Free Speech Nation, we've got an exclusive interview with Scott Nugent, a transgender man who has suffered several near-death experiences since transitioning 6 years ago. Scott tells his story next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts of
Moss?
rooms, apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Scott Nugent was a successful business sales executive named Kelly King, a top performer who earned various awards and recognition. However, at the age of 42, Scott made the difficult decision to transition. This parent of three suffered numerous medical complications and near-death experiences during the process and is now using the horrific experience to warn of the dangers to parents who are considering their kids for transition. So Scott joins me right now. Welcome. Thanks for coming. So Scott, for people who don't know your background, don't know your story, could you just tell us briefly what happened?
God, everybody says that it's like a whole, it's like a day, but I'll converse it down. At 42, I was in a vulnerable place. I was in a marriage with a woman who hated being a lesbian, didn't think she was. It was all me, a male born in a female's body. Kind of in a vulnerable place, watching Jazz Jennings, all that kind of stuff, and you know, kind of looked at my wife at the time and said, hey, maybe I'm born in the wrong body. A week later, I was in front of a trans therapist, an activist trans therapist, I guess. And she said, how long have you been dressing like a man? Now, I didn't dress like a man. I mean, I was a business sales executive. But that sentence absolutely shattered me from a 42-year-old successful business sales executive to, you know, cutting any man's head off in a boardroom to, oh, my God, I'm a total idiot.
So was it the case that, I mean, a lot of people have testified and said that when they go to these trans therapists, that they are just affirming and saying, yes, you are in the wrong body or something like that. Was that your experience? Was it just affirmation?
Absolutely. It was absolutely affirmation. And that's why books like these are so popular, and Stella O'Malley and Jen Speck and Sasha Idett and all those people, because they are fighting back against the reality of actually helping people that are in vulnerable places. And here's the thing. There are some people that medically transition and do walk a little bit lighter in life, but not very many, number one. Number two, it's no different than I had twins and didn't like my stomach and had a tummy tuck. And if I would have thought that was going to save my life at the end, when it was done, it would have been devastating. It's cosmetic surgery.
Did you feel, though, that undertaking this surgery would resolve any problems in your life? Did you?
Absolutely. You know, here's the thing, and we don't talk about stuff, and I don't know why we don't talk about stuff, because we're butchering an entire generation of children while society's going, yeah, they have no clue. So, yes, I thought it was going to fix me. And here's the problem, and here's the truth. The people that medically transition have, you know, the similarities, same-sex attracted. So we're, you know, conversion therapy reversed. Number two, they're autistic. Number three, they're mentally gifted. Number four, they're mentally ill. They are people that have been through trauma. So all these people that don't fit in at a time at 11 or 12 years old when we would cut off our arm to fit in. I mean, it got me at 42. We're telling these kids that, you know what, you don't have a superpower of being different, about being gifted. You know, you'll be a CEO at 25, but, you know, you're different, so let's medically transition you. And then you get to the process and you get through it and you realize realize, well, that didn't fix a thing. On top of people like in society and you and all that kind of stuff are not saying the truth because everybody doesn't want to hurt a man's feelings that has a sexual fetish of being considered a woman and wants, gender pronouns.
But some people would see you and see a man and say, well, that's a man. But are you saying it's not possible to change sex?
No, God, no. It's biologically impossible for one sex to become another. What's not impossible is to take cross-sex hormones, to do cosmetic surgery, to appear like the opposite sex for comfort. You know what? We deserve all the respect and dignity for doing so. But what we don't need to do is step on children's heads and ensure that males with these fetishes keep their erections so that they're okay in life.
This is a really important point. In a liberal society, surely everyone should be able to do whatever they want with their own body and make decisions about themselves and their own identity. But you've spent a lot of time talking about children, and that is a different situation, isn't it? Because children can't consent to this kind of thing, can they?
They cannot consent to these things. And until the truth is told about medical transition, until it's told that there's not now 12 complications of medical transition, they just increased it to 25 because they just actually turned over another study. All 7 studies that said it was beneficial have been retracted or modified with oops, doesn't help anything, sorry, or not enough time. The latest one went from 12 complications to 26 complications, and inside that study, there were 2 kids that committed suicide that were being medically transitioned that was suppressed. You need to know that.
So, sorry, are you saying that the studies that are available into the transitioning of children, and there can't be many because it hasn't been going on for that long, that they're all coming back and saying, we don't have any evidence that this is helping matters?
Yes!
Well, you can't be much clearer than that, Scott.
And that's not transphobic. But we have queer theory right here, right? Gay, not queer. Thank you very much, by the way. We need more righteous gays and lesbians to come up and actually take our community back instead of the righteous rights that we fought for 50 years. We got, Stonewall got in 2003 same-sex adoptions, in 2013 same-sex marriage. After that, there were no righteous fights to fight for. We won everything. And decent gays and lesbians like us, by the way, we went home to raise our kids, to do things that we needed to do. And lo and behold, Stonewall has no more money, no more donations, so they create a new business model that's stepping on our children's heads and on our children's health. Listen, let me tell you something. Today, I was walking through London. I had a totally different outfit on. I have an infection. I'm staying with a physician who said, you don't look well. I have an infection. I'm walking around London, drinking a lot of water because she told me to. Couldn't find a bathroom. Peed on myself while I'm going to a rally to speak about saving children. In the middle of London, I've got urine all the way down and all I see is Versace and this. I'm not a huge, prep. I've got alligator. Why aren't we talking about that?
So do you think it's simply the case that people don't want to talk about it? Is it simply that it makes them uncomfortable?
It's devastating to talk about it.
Well, do they think they're doing something good when it comes to these children? That they're saying that they're feeling they're confused, and so they feel this might fix it. A lot of parents are told, if you don't put them on puberty blockers, they'll kill themselves.
And here's what I don't understand about your country. I'm sorry. So we're talking about freedom of speech right here, right? Okay, and if I say something that offends somebody, or if I'm a UK citizen that is wrong or offends their business, then you take them to jail. So why aren't we taking Susie Mermaids from Mermaids to jail for saying better an alive daughter than a dead son? There's only one long-term study. All 7 that said it was great have been, rejected. One long-term study says that these kids, the truth, the only 30-year study with over 300 trans reps, these children will be more suicidal after they medically transition. Take her to jail.
But what you're talking about here is actually having a discussion about the data, about the studies. The discussion doesn't seem to be happening because there's too much noise, sometimes violence. We've seen that going on as well.
Yeah.
People attacking protesters or feminist protesters or whatever.
Yeah.
You mentioned the gay rights issue, and I think that's absolutely key. In Hannah Barnes' book, Time to Think, she talks about how the overwhelming majority of children who are referred to paediatric gender care are same-sex attracted.
Yeah.
So effectively what you've got here
43%, 67% on genders. But anyways, facts max. Go ahead.
But even so, that's a significant proportion. And that would suggest, doesn't it, that there's a kind of thing going on here where kids who are gender non-conforming, probably going to grow up to be gay, are almost being fixed or heterosexualized in a way by this process. Is that a problem? Is that something we should be talking about more?
Absolutely. But here's the thing. We've got total and complete jerks on one side. We've got total and complete jerks on the other. I mean, I just did a rally with Honor Oak and another organization. I stood in the middle. I started crying and threw my mic down. I said, F you all. You guys are all messed up. We're butchering an entire generation of children. You're over here yelling at these people. You're over here yelling at these people. And the facts are is these kids are starting to kill themselves, but nobody will listen to my speech because you're yelling and you're yelling. Shame on everybody.
So the better way to do it is to sit and have a conversation and to let people know what the facts are.
Yeah, and be realistic. Why can't we say that, hey, you know what, grown men on estrogen that are beating up lesbians, there might be a problem there that we need to talk about instead of thinking, oh, my God, we don't want to offend this man and tell him that he's a man and actually call him a man. So what in the hell are we doing? While I'm urinating in the middle of London because of a bottom surgery that's completely and totally experimental, I get, infections every 6 weeks. I probably won't live past 10 years. I won't see my grandkids. And you know what? We want to make sure that trans men, believe that they're women. And then we got righteous gay people like this finally starting to come up. Thank God. Find your voices for these children.
So you're talking about the potential complications. You've experienced all sorts of complications as a result of surgery.
I've had a pulmonary embolism. I'm on blood thinners. I have congestive heart failure. I have lung damage. I have an arm. Where do you want to go with this? These kids are getting early onset osteoporosis. They're getting, they can't have kids. I have a video on my phone right now. This kid started at 11 years old taking puberty blockers. He's 19, asking me if he's a mutant. He knows that he ruined his body, but who is he? He's a man, but I was a woman, but I destroyed my body. And then here, all we're doing is we want to make sure that women.
And yet you started much later, and these kids are,
These kids don't have a chance.
Yeah.
In Missouri, basically the doctor in Missouri that's over Missouri, basically created a rule. I love him. I absolutely love him. We medically transition kids. They're still doing it. We banned it. So he came up with a rule that said, all right, here's what we're going to do. If you medically transition adults or kids, we need to tell them that it's experimental, doesn't cure anything, causes more suicide. The adults that start it need to go through an 18-month worth of therapy, and the trans activists are flipping out. Why? Because it makes people talk about it. It gives people the information that people need to know. If you want to medically transition, do it, but know the truth. It doesn't cure anything. It's medical transition, and we're making our society sick while I'm peeing in London.
And Stonewall come back. Stonewall have said that most people who go through these transitional processes don't have these complications. What do you make of that?
Poppycock. That's not true. The only long-term study, poppycock.
So, in other words, about being informed.
Yeah, where's the debate? Who's going to debate? I mean, I had a debate with the biggest urologist in Boston who refused. Nobody will sit with me. You know why? Because nobody can debate me. This is wrong. This is a black and white issue. There is no gray in this. We should not medically transition children. And shame on people that are afraid of losing jobs. Shame on gays and lesbians for not speaking up. Shame on doctors. Shame on therapists, because I get those emails. I get people that think that they are mutants. I get people that are killing themselves. I get people calling me with guns in their mouth. And while everybody else is concerned about trans women,
they're concerned about not seeming bigoted, effectively.
Yeah, it's okay for these kids.
Yeah, I mean, you raised some very, very important points. And you've said that today you were talking about how you're almost at the point where you don't want to do this kind of work anymore.
No, I'm done. I've been doing this for 5 years. Listen, I'm not paid for this. I'm a business sales executive. I've given up that career to do this. I just spent $400 that I don't have. I got a job. I'm accepting it. I have gotten paid for none of this. My kids are absolutely, I can't even pay for my kid to go to college or stay on campus. I'm doing this because I'm a mother, because I gave birth, and because if I didn't do this, I wouldn't be a mother. And neither would any of you. I have 3 children.
Well, Scott, I think it's really important that you've come on and spoken about this and that you've let people know about your experience, because I think that in itself is an important message to get across.
Did I get it across? Are you guys hearing me? You guys hear me, please?
Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show. Scott Nugent. After the break on Free Speech Nation, is the Scottish Government mounting an elitist assault on the justice system? We'll be live to Scotland. See you in 2 minutes.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From this.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So, this week in Scotland, a new criminal justice bill was published, which included abolishing jury trials in rape cases. Does this mean politicians and senior judges do not trust the public to adjudicate on serious sexual offence cases? Well, that's the view of my next guest, senior university lecturer and author Stuart Waiton. Stuart now joins me live from Dundee. Welcome to Free Speech Nation. Stuart, could you perhaps give us some background to this? Because a lot of people won't have heard of what's happened here. What is it that the SNP are proposing?
So essentially they want to get rid of jury trials, or at least it's a pilot to get rid of jury trials, and this is part of a process towards setting up specialist sex courts. So rather than just having ordinary courts, they want to have specialist sex courts. They don't want ordinary people to adjudicate on rape because ordinary people are too bigoted. They believe in rape myths, as it's described, whereas judges are more enlightened, and so they want to have judges adjudicating on rape cases, and judges who are trauma-informed. So they will have been trained to be trauma-informed, which I can elaborate on, but won't at the minute. And they say there's overwhelming evidence that the general public have got these outdated ideas, and so you need this new process, this new way of having justice, because not enough rape cases are leading to convictions. So there's 51% lead to convictions, compared with, say, 80% in homicide, for example.
There is a valid point there, though, isn't it, that rape cases are notoriously difficult to convict, and a lot of the time they don't get the convictions, and that they feel they have to do something about that, and that maybe this is one way to do it. What would you make of that?
Well, you could say only 80% of homicides find convictions, so that's not good. We need more. So let's change the justice system so that the balance is completely in favour of the individual, and all the safety framework and the expectation of evidence and justice and innocent until proven guilty, we should just push that aside. The thing there's lots of things you can say about the rape situation itself. So, for example, 51% of cases are found guilty, and people say, well, there's more in homicide cases, but this editor of the Scottish Legal News, for example, Capel Suman, makes the observation that why should you expect rape and murder to end with the same level numbers of convictions, right? With murder, you have a clear crime, you have a body. With rape, you don't have a clear crime. You're actually trying to prove that a crime has been committed in the first place. Therefore, it is potentially much more difficult. On top of that, this idea, and it's amazing that they always just say that they're evidence-based. They say there's overwhelming evidence that the general public are based on mock jury trials, right? So this is the research that's been done at Glasgow University. However, Cheryl Thomas, who's the leading expert on doing research with actual juries, argues, and I quote, "Hardly any juror believes what are often referred to as widespread myths and stereotypes about rape and sexual assault." And she's done massive amount of research into this and says the main myth is the idea that there are rape myths, i.e. the general public do not have profoundly backward 1950s view about rape at all. And from her evidence, she completely contradicts it. In Scotland, nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to have found her work or found that there's a clash here about what's happening. So we're going to end up potentially with trials where you just have a judge who is, as I said, trauma-informed.
I mean, that is quite a leap, isn't it, to eliminate the jury, to sort of bypass that very sort of key process of the judicial system. It seems quite an extreme reaction. But I suppose there has to be some sort of debate about why conviction rates are so low. You're saying that there is counter-evidence to the idea that these myths are propagated, but it's the kind of thing people will say, well, if someone's dressed in a certain way, that you get this kind of victim-blaming thing. Is that the kind of myth you're talking about?
It is, but even there, right? I was looking at these myths and what they are. So these are things that are meant to show that you're profoundly prejudiced. Okay, so these include things like that the person didn't scream or fight. Okay, so if that doesn't happen and you think that might be relevant, does that mean you're an old-fashioned bigot? That the person failed to sufficiently communicate her lack of consent. Okay, so again, if there's no evidence that the person doing it, the accused didn't know that this person was not consenting, is that not relevant? Right? These are all things that are said to be mixed. That women sometimes send mixed signals. Right? That's a rape myth, supposedly. Do women never send mixed signals?
Stuart,
now, in some cases,
Stuart, can I ask you though? Yes. I mean, you must be aware though that the whole reason why the Me Too movement arose is because a lot of the time women were going to the police about sexual assaults and not being believed. I mean, you must be aware that it was happening. I mean, are you saying that isn't happening anymore?
No, well, I'm saying you're right. I mean, I think if you compare and contrast sort of 1970s, 80s, backward, prejudiced approaches to women and rape, things are better. And you would want to, you would want to hold open the possibility that this is true. And then what you'd want to do is you would find evidence, right? But I mean, the thing to think about here as well is that what's been argued is that the public have backward views and therefore can't be trusted. But the law is meant to reflect the public, right? The law is not meant to be a reflection of the elite and their prejudices. And I think what you're seeing here really is elite prejudice about the deplorables. They think ordinary people are sexist, bigoted, homophobic, racist, etc., 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 which, I mean, you describe this often on your programme, the way this works itself out. That is their mindset. In Scotland, the entire framework has been developed around what I would see as an extreme form of feminism that is right at the centre of Scottish government, the Scottish criminal justice system, and Holyrood. And there's plenty of evidence. They'd be quite open to say, yes, we're feminists, we believe in a patriarchal society, women are oppressed, men are dominators. And then from that prism, which is highly problematic, contestable, they are then trying to change the basis of justice, which is that you should have a jury of your peers when you've got a serious offence like rape, rather than a judge who's going to be under massive pressure to convict the person.
Well, it's a very interesting debate. I'm sure it will go on. Stuart Waiton, thanks very much for joining me. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to have this week's social sensations and unfiltered dilemmas. See you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m.
as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Back to Free Speech Nation. So, it's time for Social Sensations, the part of the show we devote to the very weird and not very wonderful world of social media. First up, this video from a few years ago on Dr. Phil has suddenly resurfaced on Twitter this weekend. And this is a woman who believes she should have been born blind and took matters into her own hands.
Do you have any regrets about taking your own vision or the process with which you did take your own vision?
I don't have any regrets taking my vision. I believe I should have been born blind, and I'm happy the way I am. I do have some regrets about the way I did it, but in the end, I'm happy the way I am.
So it's a difficult one, that, Cressida, because I do believe anyone should be able to do what they want with their own bodies, but it's just, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I think Dr. Phil wishes he'd met her a bit sooner.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember watching that. I'm a big Dr. Phil fan, and just, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Why is it resurfacing now, this kind of clip?
I wonder.
Yeah.
Well, it's this idea, isn't it, that we should take... I'm choosing my words carefully.
Yes.
I listened to a podcast recently about this, where people's mental illness sometimes... Perhaps we ought to... Traditionally, we section people with certain mental illnesses.
Yes.
And that's now potentially falling out of fashion because...
We're prioritising identity too much.
Yes, so if you identify as somebody who shouldn't be cited, the argument is, who am I to tell you, or who's Dr. Phil to tell you that you should...
So is Cressida right? Is this just a lunatic?
She's obviously got mental health issues.
Yeah.
But as you say, I think it goes hand in hand with people's, like, be kind.
Yes.
Live and let live.
Well, I saw an interview on Norwegian TV. I wasn't watching Norwegian TV, it was a clip that was posted. And it was someone who identifies as disabled, saying, nothing wrong with them, but they say, I'm always felt I should be in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And this was an approving interview. Why can't you just say, be a bit grateful for what you've got, right? There are people who would give anything to swap.
And that is the thing, is we show gratitude with our health. You know, of the list of things, wealth and all of it, health is... up at the top. You cannot appreciate anything else.
It's wanting to be a victim, isn't it? You identify yourself out of victim status, make yourself blind, make yourself disabled.
But it's the people indulging that's the issue.
So
no one's
strange.
just going, this is wrong.
It's
There is something wrong here.
OK, well, we're going to move on. This is a transgender influencer, Dylan Mulvaney, has posted a video this week on TikTok. Let's have a look.
Like, the articles written about me using he pronouns and calling me a man over and over again. And I feel like that should be illegal. I don't know. That's just bad journalism.
So I think Dylan Mulvaney is perfectly entitled to criticise journalists, but to claim that speech should be illegal if Dylan Mulvaney doesn't like the speech?
Well, let's see what happens when Dylan Mulvaney says something that's illegal. I mean, it's just a bad idea.
Well, if you set that precedent saying that we can decide what...
Eventually,
you know.
somebody will be in power and you'll want to say something that they don't want you to say. Just don't go there.
But I think, like, he should be able to do whatever he wants with his life and his body. Yes, me! Because he's a man, and I don't mind that he can dress or identify however he likes, because I believe in liberal values. But the idea that he should be able to impose how I speak...
Of course, compelled speech.
Insane.
Well, this is what this whole movement has been, the gender ideology. You must just go along with what we're saying for our internal feelings.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah.
Of course it's wrong.
OK, well, look, we're going to move on now to this part of the show where we talk through your unfiltered dilemmas. Our first dilemma came in from Anne. Thank you, Anne, for writing this. Anne says, my female colleague and I, who are in our 60s, have a boss who is young enough to be our son, who keeps on referring to us as girls in emails when he issues his instructions to us. I find this extremely irritating and feel he's being condescending, putting us in our place. But my colleague tells me to take it as a compliment and not to say anything. Who is right? And is there a polite way of getting him to treat us with more respect? Right, so Cressida, as the girl on the panel, do you think that is it offensive?
Look, love, is it offensive? I don't know. When I was 18, I would have had a lot to say about this,
right.
And I just don't care. I mean, enjoy it while you can. I don't know.
Is it complimentary then?
Is it complimentary? No, it's not complimentary.
OK.
Is it? I mean, it says more about him than them, I think. It tells me that he's not very self-aware.
Or is he trying to be nice? Like,
that's a bit David Brent, isn't it?
It is a bit David Brent, but David Brent was a nice guy getting things wrong, wasn't he?
And I wouldn't make David Brent illegal. So carry on.
Is it offensive? You know a lot about this sort of stuff.
Yes.
Causing offence.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, it's a tricky one because I catch myself out now saying girls, or you know, instead of my wife's like, she's a woman. And I was like, oh, yeah. Yes, she's a woman, if I'm describing somebody. So it is you do have to look, there's something going on there.
OK, you think it is a form of, it's patronising, but it comes from a certain kind of attitude.
Who knows what his intent is, exactly, precisely, but it could well be, and certainly if he is, like, markedly younger, he could well be seeing it as like, hey, girls.
Maybe it's a status thing, then.
I don't know. Or
Who knows?
He's just not a good guy.
Who knows? Well, look, we've got another dilemma now from Lottie. Lottie says, one of my best friends has just started dating my male flatmate. I set them up and originally was fine with the idea of them being together, but now she's round the whole time and I feel like it's starting to damage our friendship. How do I tell them that I need some space? I don't want to lose her. What do you think?
I think house shares should be illegal. Well, we're talking about things... I haven't done it for many years and I would never do it again, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? It's not going to end well.
No.
I don't think they're all going to sit down and have a nice conversation and agree.
No, well, this is what happened to me, and I lost 2 best friends.
Oh, really?
That's exactly what it was, yeah.
Wow.
And they hooked up, and then that was it. I was like, all right. Yeah.
Well, Josh, I would love to explore that therapeutically with you, but we've run out of time.
She was a girl!
On that tragic note, thanks for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Joe Biden formally launched his campaign for a second term. Another woman was assaulted for speaking her mind, and an Italian mermaid got all the locals hot and bothered. Thanks to my panel, Josh Howie and Cressida Wetton, and of course to my guests, Douglas Carswell, Dr. Carol Sherwood, Ben Harris, Raquel Rosario Sanchez, Scott Nugent, and Stuart Wayton. And if you want to join us live in the studio, be part of our wonderful studio audience, you can do that. Just go to www.sroaudiences.com. Stay tuned for the brilliant Mark Dolan tonight. That's next. And Headliners is on at 11 o'clock, where comedians take you through the next day's news stories. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
Hello and welcome to the latest weather update from the Met Office. I'm Marco Pitagna. Showers will gradually fade across the UK over the next couple of days. The weather will become quite fine for a time around the middle of the week before wet and windy weather arrives from the southwest later. Low pressure is moving off the scene now, allowing a ridge of high pressure to build in, certainly through Tuesday and Wednesday, before wet and windy weather arrives as low pressure arrives from the southwest through Thursday and Friday. Back to the detail for the overnight period now, though, and showers are gradually transferring away from west to east as we go through the overnight period, so becoming more focused towards the north and east of the UK during the early hours of Monday. Fewer showers then out towards the west later in the night, some clearer spells here, and turning a bit chilly across some rural spots across those western spots. Could dip into low single figures in 1 or 2 very rural locations, but out towards the north and east, generally temperatures holding up with the cloud and the showers. And certainly a pretty showery picture as we go into Bank Holiday Monday across central, eastern parts of England. 1 or 2 quite heavy showers, could be the odd thunderstorm around too, and some showery rain also working its way in from the north across mainland Scotland. So once again, the best of the sunshine with a much better day unfolding out across Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest of England. In the sunshine, temperatures climbing into the high teens, could see 18 or 19 degrees down towards the southeast. 19 is 66 in Fahrenheit, but quite chilly up towards the far northeast. Overnight Monday into Tuesday, showers continue across those northern and far eastern areas, but out towards the west with high pressure starting to build in. It's a quieter picture, there'll be some clear spells, and again turning a little bit chilly in some rural spots, but on the whole, just temperatures are not causing any issues. Into Tuesday itself, 1 or 2 showers are still possible across the far north and across the far east of the UK, but elsewhere it's a pretty good day actually, with high pressure generally dominating, lots of sunshine around, some patchy cloud in places, but on the whole a pretty decent day, and temperatures once again climbing into the mid to high teens in places, but still quite chilly up towards the far northeast of Scotland, where temperatures will struggle here. Pretty good conditions still on Wednesday, but we will start to see some rain moving in from the southwest and turning windier from the southwest too later this week.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of